Tonight, we lead with Pakistan. The people have got a raw deal, and that's putting it mildly. Petrol prices have crossed 300 rupees per litre, electricity bills have shot through the roof, and food is unaffordable for many. The government says it cannot give relief because of IMF bailout conditions. But why does none of it apply to their army? Even when everything else is falling, the army's budget, the defence budget, continues to rise in Pakistan. Does the IMF not see this? Should they not push for a cut? We'll discuss that. In China, growth remains sluggish. The government is making some moves to fix the economy. Experts say the effort is cosmetic, though. In Ukraine, elections are being held, but not by Kiev. It's Russia that's holding these polls. We'll explain. Meanwhile, a new video of Prigozhin has emerged in which he says he is alive. China's map war is drawing a response from most of its neighbors. And what does Beijing say? Be rational. Should India adopt one nation, one election? The debate is on. In Gabon, suitcases full of cash seized a day after the coup. What is Pope Francis doing in Mongolia? And why has Paris banned e-scooters? We'll bring you all of this and more. The headlines first. 4 Armenian troops killed in clashes with Azerbaijan. Baku says 3 of its soldiers have also been injured. Tensions between the two countries have spiked in recent months. The two ex-Soviet republics accuse each other of cross-border attacks and have been locked in a bitter dispute over Nagorno-Karabakh. Nobel Foundation's invitation to Russian ambassador sparks a row. Sweden's prime minister says he disagrees with the decision. Last year, the foundation did not invite the Russian and Belarusian envoys over the war in Ukraine. Many Swedish politicians have threatened to boycott the event. The Nobel ceremony is held every year in Stockholm in December. Thaksin Shinawatra gets a royal reprieve. The Thai king cuts his 8-year prison sentence to 1 year. The 74-year-old former prime minister had applied for a royal pardon yesterday. He was convicted of corruption and abuse of power. China braces for super typhoon Saola. Hong Kong issues the highest level of alert. Millions asked to stay indoors. Schools closed. Hundreds of flights cancelled. Beijing says Saola could be the biggest storm, the strongest storm to hit the region in more than 70 years. X, formerly known as Twitter, will now collect users' biometric data. The Elon Musk-owned company also wants to know your job and your educational history. This was revealed in its new privacy policy. It will come into effect from the end of this month. And Liverpool says, don't show me the money. Reports say it has rejected Saudi team Al Ittihad offer for Mohamed Salah. The Premier League club is set to have turned down a $190 million offer. Egyptian superstar Salah joined Liverpool in 2017. Last year, he signed a new 3-year contract with them. We cover Pakistan regularly on the show. We talk about their army, their political leaders, also their deep state interests. But today's story is not just about that. It's also about Pakistan's people. In one word, their life is miserable. Electricity bills are too high, food is becoming a luxury, and the political situation, let's not even get there. And on Thursday, they received another blow. Fuel prices. Pakistan's caretaker government has announced fresh hikes in fuel rates. Petrol prices are up by almost 15 rupees. That's Pakistani rupees. Diesel prices are up by 18 rupees. So the new rates look like this. Petrol, 305 Pakistani rupees per litre. Diesel, 311 Pakistani rupees per litre. Now, this latest increase is important because now fuel rates have reached the 300 mark, and this has never happened in Pakistan ever before. So the effect is psychological as well. And this price hike is relentless. It's the second one in 15 days. Put together, fuel prices have risen by more than 30 Pakistani rupees. That's 30 rupees in 15 days. How is the common man supposed to afford all of this? Many of them can't. Listen to these accounts from the capital, Islamabad.
दिन ब दिन एक्सपेंसेस बढ़ते जा रहे हैं, इन्फ्लेशन रेट कहाँ से कहाँ जा रहा है. पहले जहाँ एक वीक में 500 का पेट्रोल लगता था, वहाँ 1000 का भी पूरा नहीं पड़ता. आज मैं देख रहा हूँ 300 प्लस प्राइस हो गई है.
ये जो पेट्रोल पे पहले डलवाता था 2000 में, अभी मुझे 5000 में नहीं डलता. ठीक है, गाड़ी में स्टार्ट करता हूँ, सिर्फ थोड़ा सा निकल जाए बाद 2000 का पेट्रोल गया. तो आप बताइए कि जो नॉर्मल बंदा है वो क्या, उसकी सर्वाइवल कैसे हो सकती है.
Fuel sets off a chain reaction. If fuel prices are high, food prices will also rise. And the reason is quite simple. How are vegetables and food grains transported to your market? On trucks. And what do trucks run on? Mostly diesel. So when fuel prices increase, food prices will also increase. And they're already high. Pakistan's food inflation was 40% in July, 40%. Can you imagine that? Food items are 40% more expensive compared to July 2022. And the average income? It's almost 11% down compared to last year. So income is less. And at the same time, expenses are more, much more. The question is why? Why are prices increasing so much in Pakistan? One reason, of course, is the global volatility. In West Asia, diesel prices are up more than 4% since the middle of August. Petrol is up 19%. So global fuel prices are up. And usually when that happens, governments cushion the impact. They announce subsidies or they reduce the fuel tax. But Pakistan is not in a position to do any of that. In fact, they have added more fuel taxes. Until Thursday, the petroleum levy was 55 Pakistani rupees. Now it is 60 Pakistani rupees. That's the tax. So instead of helping the people, the government is doubling down. It's increasing the taxes. And why is that happening? Because of the deal that they've struck with the IMF, the International Monetary Fund. A quick reminder, Pakistan sealed an IMF bailout in late June. It's worth around $3 billion. But this bailout came with some conditions, like imposing a petroleum levy, like increasing taxes, hiking energy tariffs. The idea here is to beef up the government's revenue, to make sure that the state is earning more. But for the people, it only means more hardships. It's often called the bitter pill. But the thing is, in Pakistan, this bitter pill is not for everyone. It's only for the ordinary citizens. If you are a politician or a general, life is still sweet. Just look at the defense budget. Pakistan has allocated 1.8 trillion rupees for the military. That's around $5.8 billion. That's also 16% more than the year before. How do you justify this? Your average income fell by 11%, but your defense budget grew by 16%. All in the name of some made-up threat from India. Let's be clear here, Pakistan's outsized defense budget is not about strategy, it is not about any serious threat, it's about misplaced priorities. Pakistan's people cannot afford fuel, food or electricity, but what does their government splurge on? Missiles and fighter jets. It's selfish, it's self-destructive, and it's dangerous for the neighborhood. Why doesn't the IMF call out this trend? Why don't they impose conditions on defense spending in Pakistan? Reports say they did. The IMF did try. They asked Pakistan to reduce defense spending by 10 to 20%. Clearly, Islamabad did not agree. They would much rather squeeze their people than the army. And Pakistan is an exception here. Other countries have agreed to cap their defense spending. Egypt, for instance, was negotiating an IMF bailout this year, so Cairo agreed to scale back military expenditure. So did Sri Lanka. But in Pakistan, it's blasphemy. You cannot even ask for it. In 2008, Islamabad was negotiating yet another bailout. The IMF reportedly asked for defense cuts, and no surprises, Pakistan said no. Honestly, this is the worst kind of apathy. Your people are burning electricity bills on the streets, but your generals are living the high life. We often say that Pakistan is an army with a country. They run businesses worth $26 billion. It ranges from petrol pumps and factories to bakeries and banks. Meanwhile, their citizens cannot even afford food. At this rate, the country will be in ruins. Only the army will remain. So Pakistan is making a hash of its economy. Its iron brother China is not really doing much better. Beijing is taking a sledgehammer to its financial foundations. The current state of China's economy can be described in one word: fragile. And China, being China, is more focused on controlling information than correcting its mistakes. That said, their story is so bad, it's breaching the firewall. The trends are there for the world to see. Chinese households are spending less and saving more. There is a surge in long-term deposits, or what we call fixed deposits, FDs, the kind that your local bank gives you. It is considered the safest form of investment. In China, they're not called FDs though, they're called CDs, certificates of deposit. And this is where Chinese citizens are putting their money. I have some data for you. It is from Chinese financial institutions. They have received deposits worth over $766 billion. And this influx was in just the first quarter of 2023. What explains this? Why are Chinese citizens buying these certificates of deposits or CDs? Because they don't want to risk their money. And that's problem number one. Problem number two is credit. Chinese households are borrowing less. Businesses too have become averse to credit. For the longest time, Chinese banks were loan machines. They used to give out a lot of loans, but now they're struggling. They have the money, but they don't have the borrowers. No one wants that money. In July, new bank loans in China tumbled. They fell by a whopping 89% from the previous month. This includes both personal and business loans. So here is the diagnosis. People are living in fear, they're saving money and spending less. Businesses are worried too, they're borrowing less. And by extension, they're investing less in their businesses. In short, there is an environment of fear in China. The risk appetite has reduced, there is uncertainty, and this has been the case for a while now. We've been reporting on this. Finally, Beijing has woken up. It is trying to fix the mess. China's central bank has made an announcement. It is trying to help other banks. How? By reducing the amount of money they need to hold in reserves. This is specifically in foreign exchange. Banks have to hold a certain amount in foreign exchange. Central banks have a term for it. It's called Foreign Exchange Reserve Requirement Ratio. The goal is to free up some of this cash for banks. How much money is already there in this reserve? More than $800 billion by the end of July. And how much money will today's move release? Around $16 billion in foreign exchange. Banks in China will be able to put this money to use. They don't have to hold it, 16 billion. The Chinese government has taken a string of decisions recently. In fact, one of them is linked to their property sector. It is down in the dumps. Beijing wants people to buy more homes. So they have slashed payment requirements. They have reduced down payment. Now you have to pay only 20% of the cost upfront. That's your down payment, just 20%. The rest can be financed through a bank. For second-time home buyers, the rate is 30%. They've also cut down mortgage rates. Like I said, the goal is to drive up home sales for people to buy more property. Then there are tax breaks on offer. This is also for parents specifically. They can claim higher tax concessions for childcare. They can also claim concessions for spending on education. So like I said, the government has announced a lot of measures. What do we make of these? They may have an impact, but a very limited one. It's like treating a cancer with a plaster. That's what China is doing. And I'll tell you why I say this. Take the example of the new mortgage rules. They have cut down payment terms. But will that alone encourage people to buy more homes? We don't want to hazard a guess. This is what the people of Shanghai are saying.
Because the houses in Shanghai are too expensive, we don't even have the ability to consider.
So lower down payments won't help. And China won't do what needs to be done. It keeps avoiding the question of bailouts. There has been a growing demand for this, for bailouts. Experts say the Chinese economy needs a cash injection. It needs money, a stimulus package to revive the animal spirits. But Beijing keeps avoiding this discussion. They won't be able to do this for very long. All signs are pointing towards a bailout. Look at this report. It came out yesterday. China's top lenders are struggling with bad loans. They have shot up, bad loans. This report covers 4 major Chinese banks: Commercial Bank of China, China Construction Bank, and Agriculture Bank of China. Their bad debts have increased by almost 8%. And do you know what's the value of their bad debts? More than $164 billion. This is for the first 6 months of this year. Clearly, China will take some time to get its act together. The announcements may generate some headlines, but until Beijing fixes the fundamentals, growth will remain sluggish. Meanwhile, India has overtaken China. Numbers from the first quarter are out. We reported them yesterday. India grew at 7.8% this year. China is hovering around the 5% mark. In Ukraine, it's election time. Just one problem though. Ukraine is not holding this election. Russia is. That's right. It's Russia that has organized the latest election in Ukraine. Let me explain how this works. Voting is underway in 4 Ukrainian regions: Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia and Kherson. All 4 regions are under Russian occupation. They are ruled by governors appointed by Moscow. In October last year, Russia formally annexed these regions, and now they're holding elections. The idea is to solidify their control, to show their absolute authority over this territory. And how's the turnout? Well, looking at the pictures, not good. People aren't exactly flooding the polling booths. I guess that was expected. Ukraine has rejected this vote as a sham. The exiled mayor of Mariupol says people are being asked to vote at gunpoint.
It is clear that there is no trust from the people towards this process, which should be called a sham election. And it is also necessary to see that they'll go from house to house, as they have already done before. Also, they're going to walk from apartment to apartment, as they did before, talking to people. There are 2 soldiers standing nearby, carrying machine guns, and they tell the people that they must vote.
Does this election change anything? Officially, it doesn't. Just a handful of countries recognize Russia's control over these regions, states like Syria and North Korea. And despite these elections, that will not change. Just look at Crimea. Russia annexed Crimea all the way back in 2014. Moscow's control there is absolute, but even today, the world has not recognized it. So unless Kiev cedes this land to Russia, global recognition will not happen. Having said that, it does demonstrate Russia's grip. These 4 regions plus Crimea make up 20% of Ukraine. If Russia is holding elections there, it means Putin is confident. He is confident of the security situation. As for the results, let's not even kid ourselves. Only a fool would bet against Russia's candidates. Expect some mind-boggling victory margins here, maybe 80 or 90%. But coming back to Kiev, what does this mean for Zelensky and his government? It's a provocation and an insult. Imagine your enemy holding elections on your territory. You would be enraged. So what is Kiev doing about this? They seem to be escalating their drone strikes. Earlier today, one such strike was reported in Russia's Kursk region. Now, this is located in western Russia. It is home to a Russian nuclear power plant. Any damages? None so far. Russian officials say the plant is working fine. It has 4 reactors. 3 of them are operational. 1 is inactive. But damages or not, this attack is important. Remember, 1 nuclear plant is already involved in this war, the one in Zaporizhia. And now a 2nd nuclear facility could be targeted. Of course, Ukraine denies any of this. Kiev does not take responsibility for attacks inside Russia. They neither confirm nor deny the attacks. And why is that? Because NATO says they will only support defense, not offense. Meaning you cannot take the fight into Russia. You must fight within your borders. That's what NATO tells Ukraine. But don't these attacks violate that rule? Well, technically, they do. But Ukraine does not use Western weapons to strike inside Russia. They use their own weapons, like homemade drones. Clearly, Zelensky thinks that will keep NATO off his back. These drone strikes do have a political objective to scare the people of Russia. But strategically, they're pointless. Ukraine is not destroying anything of strategic value. For that, they need their counter-offensive to succeed, and that is not happening. It's been getting a lot of bad press, that counter-offensive. People are calling it slow, expensive, and a borderline failure. On Thursday, Ukraine's foreign minister hit back. He says, "Come fight Russia yourself."
Criticizing the slow pace of counteroffensive equals to spitting into the face of Ukrainian soldier who sacrifices his life every day, moving forward and liberating 1 kilometer of Ukrainian soil after another. I would recommend all critics to shut up, come to Ukraine and try to liberate 1 square centimeter by themselves.
That's Dmitry Kuleba for US. Charming as always. Over in Russia, the Wagner mystery is deepening. Their top boss, Yevgeny Prigozhin, died in a plane crash last week. Or did he? A social media account linked to Wagner has released a new video. It shows Prigozhin somewhere in Africa. What's more, he says he is alive.
For those of you who are discussing whether I'm alive or not, how I'm doing, right now it's the weekend, second half of August 2023. I'm in Africa. So for people who like to discuss wiping me out or my private life, how much I earn or whatever else, everything's okay.
заработков там или еще чего-нибудь.
So what's the deal here? Well, the video is said to be old. It was shot sometime in the middle of August. But talk about a mysterious coincidence. Of all the things he could have said, Prigozhin chose this, that he is alive. Russia has ruled out an international probe into his plane crash, but on Wednesday the Kremlin did make an admission. It said the crash may have been caused deliberately. And who will investigate that? Russian officials, of course. So don't be surprised if Ukraine or the West is blamed. Either way, this phase of the war is proving to be highly eventful. It is filled with intrigue, escalation, and of course, more violence. Vantage continues after a short break.
Stay put because of balancing gravitational forces and thereby reduce fuel consumption for the aircraft. The spacecraft will be put in orbit around the L1 point, from where it will be able to observe the sun without any obstructions.
No, actually that is a study project. I think they are going to study at a distance of 15 lakh kilometers. It is going closer to sun, and they are trying to understand the core, and it's a good project. See, in ISRO we have no dearth of knowledge or intelligence or anything.
In 2018, NASA's Parker solar probe came closer to the sun than any other previous spacecraft. It went right through the sun's outer layer and endured extremely high temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius. But the Parker solar probe continued to function without any issues. On the contrary, the Aditya L1 spacecraft will be positioned much farther from the sun than NASA's Parker solar probe. It will not encounter such intense heat. The Aditya L1 spacecraft
Now let's talk about a different battle for territory. It's between China and its neighbors. Earlier this week, China released some maps. We told you about it on the show, China's map war. This new map showed Indian territories as part of China. Beijing claimed Aksai Chin and Arunachal Pradesh. India had issued a strong rebuttal. China tried to play it down. But the row has now snowballed. More stakeholders have jumped in. China's neighbors are condemning this map in one voice. The Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan and Vietnam, they've all lodged a strong protest. What are they angry about? China claims a large part of the South China Sea, and that's what these countries are upset about. This map is problematic for more than one reason. It has what China calls the 10-dash line. We're talking about this area. Can you see a U-shaped structure here? It covers the South China Sea. The lines indicate Beijing's claims. And as you can see, China claims almost the entire region. Again, not a new claim. The South China Sea is an old territorial dispute. There are 6 parties involved here. China, of course, is one of them. The others are Vietnam, the Philippines, Taiwan, Malaysia and Brunei. 6 in all. Each with their own claims, sometimes overlapping, but each one of them is pitted against Beijing. Now, China's claims are the most far-reaching, and with this map, those claims are expanding. There are additions in this map. China has added one more dash near Taiwan. Older maps just had 9 dashes. It used to be called the 9-dash line. This new map has 10. Taipei has slammed Beijing's actions. The Philippines says China's claims have quote-unquote no basis. Vietnam says the map has, again, quote, no value. And Malaysia has called the map, and I'm quoting again, non-binding. These statements are similar to the one made by India on Tuesday. New Delhi too lodged a protest. It said China's claims have no basis. But you see, mere statements will not be enough. China has played down this map. It has asked everyone to quote-unquote not over-interpret. What does that even mean? The fact is this map was issued by the government of China, by their Ministry of Natural Resources. So this will be seen as China's official position. It's not just a drawing meant to be hung on walls. It has been approved by the Chinese state. And during negotiations, Chinese officials can use it as a tool. Chinese military too can use it. They will follow it, this new map, for border deployments, for their provocative drills, and for making the threats that they routinely do. Because this map is an official document now. It tells the world how China sees its borders. So there is no question of over-interpretation. Not surprisingly, China is playing down the issue. Yesterday, it called the release of the map a routine practice.
China's stance on the South China Sea is consistent and clear. Competent Chinese authorities update and release different types of standard maps on a routine practice every year, which aims to provide standard map services and educate the public to use maps in accordance with rules. We hope that the relevant sides can see it in an objective and rational way.
Classic China. They will claim your land and then ask you to be objective and rational. What gives? The world has seen too many of these stunts to be swayed by words. They don't want to legitimize China's claims. Perhaps that's why Xi Jinping wants to skip the G20 summit, because if he comes, it will be a tough crowd for him to face. We told you about this yesterday. Xi Jinping may not come to New Delhi. And let me repeat, we don't have an official confirmation on that yet. Beijing has not spoken on the matter, but all signs point towards a no-show now. Today, the Chinese press released this, a schedule for the ASEAN summit. It is happening just before the G20. Xi Jinping was supposed to go to Jakarta for it, and from there, fly to New Delhi for the G20. But he will not attend the ASEAN summit. Instead, he is sending his premier, Li Qiang, who may also represent China at the G20. Again, we are waiting for a word from Beijing, but US President Joe Biden remains hopeful. He is hoping for Xi Jinping to show up.
The answer is I hope he attends.
All right, thanks everybody.
Will you be going to Florida, sir?
Rishi Sunak wants to see Xi Jinping too. A few days back, there was talk of a bilateral between the two leaders, again on the sidelines of the G20. New Delhi had plans too. Last month, Prime Minister Modi had met Xi Jinping at the BRICS summit. There was talk of some kind of truce on the border. Negotiators were asked to speed up. But we haven't heard of any progress since. Will an appeal from world leaders change Xi Jinping's mind? Guess we'll have to wait and see. Here in India, the rumour mills are buzzing. There is talk of one nation, one election. What does that mean? It means all elections would be held simultaneously. The general election, the state assembly elections, even the local elections, all of them will be held together. That's one nation, one election. In fact, after independence, this is how elections were done in India, all at once. But in the 1950s and 60s, the cycle broke. Some state governments were dismissed by the centre, others were dissolved before their tenure. As a result, the timing got jumbled. But the current government of Prime Minister Modi wants to change this. It wants one nation, one election. The ruling party, which is the BJP, had promised this in 2014 and then again in 2019. The Prime Minister too has endorsed this idea multiple times, but it never really took off. Not until this week. The government has now created a special committee. It will be headed by India's former President, Ram Nath Kovind. What will this committee do? Reports say it will hold talks with multiple stakeholders. I'm assuming that means political parties and election officials. It will then prepare a report and submit it to Parliament. The government says the plan is not immediate. The report will be debated by lawmakers. The question is, when will this debate happen? Interestingly, the government has also called for a special session of Parliament to be held between September 18th and 22nd. Rumour is one nation, one election could be on the agenda. The government has not confirmed this. So right now it is all speculation. But if not in September, then the report will be submitted one day. And whenever it is, we need to be prepared. Because this is a very important issue. Elections are the most integral part of any democracy, and how those elections are held is equally important. So should the current system stay, or should all elections be clubbed together? Let me list out the pros and cons. First, the pros. It would save a lot of money for sure. The 2019 general election cost around 60,000 crore rupees. The same year, 7 state elections were also held. Some in April, some in October, and then some in November. Had we clubbed all of them together, we could have saved money. Same with security forces and poll officials. Right now, you need to mobilize them multiple times. But if all elections are held together, that will not be necessary. The burden would be less. The third pro is increased focus on governance. You campaign once in 5 years and that's it. The rest of the time you work, ideally. But right now you're almost always campaigning. Chief ministers fly down to their states during elections, same with the Prime Minister and his cabinet. It's like the country is always in election mode. With one nation, one election, you can correct that. And number 4, more voter turnout. Suppose you work in Delhi, but your vote is in Mumbai. You may not be able to fly down for every election. But if it's all at once, there's a higher chance that you can. Now, these are the 4 advantages. Now, the disadvantages. Number 1, regional issues may get ignored. Let's face it, general elections tend to attract more attention than state elections. So what will happen if they're all held together? National issues may end up dominating regional ones. In India, that could be a problem. We have dozens of regional parties. Number 2, the logistics. Simultaneous elections would require more EVMs, electronic voting machines. Former poll officials say almost 3 times more. Challenge number 3, educating the people. The last time India held simultaneous elections was in the 1960s, so an entire generation is not even familiar with the idea. How do you educate them? How do you explain why they're voting twice or thrice? Or that one vote is for the centre, the other is for the state? It could get complicated. And finally, challenge number 4, some legal confusions. What happens if an assembly is dissolved prematurely or a government loses its majority? Will it be president's rule for the remaining time? Again, we need clarity on this. Having said that, there are countries which already hold simultaneous elections like Belgium, Sweden, Brazil and South Africa, and to some extent even the United States of America. Their presidential elections coincide with elections to the US House. Does that mean India should also do it? Well, it's tough to say. Belgium and Sweden follow a different system. We follow first past the post. They follow proportional representation. Here in India, the candidate with the highest number of votes wins. It's as simple as that. That's not how proportional representation works. If a party wins 30% of the vote, they get 30% of the seats, hence proportional. Over in the US, there are only 2 major parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. Here in India, 6 national parties, 54 state parties, more than 2,000 unrecognized ones. So copy-paste may not work. We need an Indian version of simultaneous elections. Most political parties agree that it's necessary. What they disagree on is how it should be done. But honestly, there is only one way, through consensus. And now let's shift our focus to Gabon. The all-new Game of Thrones. One family has been in power for decades and now there's a coup and people within the family seems to be pulling the strings. Let's get you the latest. A day after the coup, the arrests have begun. The new military leaders are going after the ousted president's close family. Ali Bongo, the ousted president, is still in detention and now his son, Nuruddin Bongo Valentin, has also been picked up. This footage was released yesterday. Take a look at this. That's not a great look for the young Bongo. And a slight segue here. Why duffel bags stuffed with cash? It's 2023. You'd think they would turn to cryptocurrencies by now, or corrupt politicians incapable of moving away from suitcases full of cash. Of course, the young Bongo denied that it was all loot. Well, his cabinet director tried anyway. Listen to this.
C'est des fonds de campagne.
Des fonds de campagne.
Oui.
Et combien?
Je ne sais pas. Je ne sais pas s'ils ont dû compter, je ne sais pas.
Une estimation?
Je saurais vous dire. Je saurais vous dire, c'est les valises. Comme ça, je ne sais pas combien de valises contient, donc je ne peux pas vous dire. Je ne sais pas.
Ça a été retrouvé dans quelle pièce?
Dans le choc, c'était dans le salon. Dans la pièce, au milieu.
Est-ce que vous êtes bon pour justifier? Vous êtes une banque pour justifier ou pas?
Non, non. Enfin, je ne vais pas rentrer là. Si je comptais, c'est pas. Non.
They claim all that cash was campaign funds. Remember, this is days after the election took place in Gabon. Perhaps they want people to believe that they ran a thrifty campaign. Either way, the excuse has not worked. The young Bongo and his cabinet director have been arrested, as have others who were part of the Ali Bongo regime. Gabon's military leaders say they've seized both money and narcotics. And on the face of it, this seems like a good step by the coup leaders, but Gabon's political opposition has its doubts. We mentioned that an election took place on Saturday. The result was declared on Wednesday. That's 2 days ago. Ali Bongo was declared the winner, and within minutes of that declaration, he was detained. The military says that the election was fraudulent, and that's apparently why they stepped in. That's their excuse. But what about Gabon's political opposition? Ali Bongo's main opponent was this man, Albert Ondo Ossa. He was once an economics professor, but for years he's been part of Gabon's politics, even serving in the cabinet of former President Omar Bongo, Ali Bongo's father. In Saturday's election, he was the main opposition face, and he has his own theories about the situation that is unfolding.
We need to put things into context. First of all, it's not a coup d'etat, it's a palace revolution. General Brice Oligui Nguema is Ali Bongo's cousin. The campaign was 60 years of Bongo is too much. The Bongos found it necessary to put Ali Bongo aside and to effectively continue the Bongo PDG system. They put Oligui Nguema forward. We know who's behind Oligui Nguema. The Bongo system continues.
He believes that the new military president is a puppet, and the one pulling the strings is actually the ousted Ali Bongo's older sister.
Behind Oligui Nguema, there's no need to look. It's Pascaline Bongo who's there. That's all. So Oligui Nguema is an underling. Behind Oligui Nguema is Pascaline Bongo, and the Bongo clan continues in power.
The plot thickens. Pascaline is former President Omar Bongo's eldest child, officially anyway. She has served as foreign minister in her father's cabinet. She was then director of the cabinet till her father died, 2009. After that, when her brother Ali Bongo came to power, she was sidelined, and apparently the two share a frosty relationship. So the opposition leader Ossa believes that she has a hand in the coup. But this may be just a way to delegitimize the incoming military president. Gabon's opposition wants the military to declare Ossa as the winner of the last election.
We cannot ask the Gabonese people, who massively elected Professor Albert Ondo Ossa to be President of the Republic, to renounce their choice. This is unacceptable, and the people will not accept it. To understand this, we need to only look at where 14 years of illegitimate mandate has led us. Your courage and patriotism honor our country and our armies. By choosing truth and the ballot box, you are choosing the nation. The nation would be grateful to you.
It seems Ossa is taking the combative approach, and his fellow opposition leaders are trying to sweet-talk the military. Neither seems to be working. General Brice Oligui Nguema is set to be sworn in on Monday. He'll be sworn in as the president of the transition, but he still hasn't given a timeline for the transition back to democracy. Opposition leader Ossa has given a bleak assessment.
The Gabonese people took to the streets to welcome Bongo's departure. But I did say that they saw that it wasn't the Bongos who had left, but a Bongo who had replaced a Bongo. They're going to have to come back to reality.
So the visuals we began with, the raid and the duffel bags full of cash, are they a sign? Does the military promise a corruption-free future for Gabon? Or are they just an eyewash? A way to distract the public while the Bongo family settles personal scores? We'll find out in the days to come. Our next story is a bit about economics, a bit about sport, and a lot about the heart. Everyone loves a good underdog tale. They also love a great comeback story. So when you add all of this together, you're almost certain to get success, which is exactly what has happened at this Welsh football club. In 2021, it was taken over by Hollywood heavyweights Ryan Reynolds, along with another familiar face, Rob McElhenney. Now, they did not buy the club as a couple of rich Yanks, but as genuine sports fans. Fans who wanted to revive the fortunes of the oldest football club in Wales, possibly the third oldest in the world, and they have revived fortunes. Not just the clubs, but also the fortunes of all of North Wales. The CEO of North Wales Tourism made an announcement a few days ago. He said the Hollywood duo and their purchase have given a massive boost to tourism in the region. How big a boost? Apparently worth £1 billion. That's about $1.27 billion. Our next report brings you the details.
These days, what comes to mind when you think about breaking football news? Perhaps you think of Lionel Messi and his transfer to the Major League Soccer club Inter Miami. How the Argentine magician is changing the face of US soccer. Or maybe your mind goes to Saudi Arabia, where millions and millions of dollars are being shelled out to lure some of the world's best talent, and where Cristiano Ronaldo is plying his trade as the world's highest paid footballer. But far from the bright lights of Miami and Riyadh, a glorious football fairy tale is unfolding in the little Welsh town of Wrexham. Wrexham is barely a city. We aren't being unkind. It became Wales' 7th city just last year. It was confirmed exactly a year ago today. Before that, it was an industrial town of about 65,000 people. But in that town lay buried a sleeping giant. Or should we say dragon? Located in this town was the oldest football club in all of Wales, Wrexham AFC. Wrexham was founded in 1864. Over the last 160-odd years, they have seen it all. Winning streaks, golden years, poor form and relegation. More recently, they were in professional football purgatory, playing in the English 5th tier, the National League. But then, a sort of miracle happened. Out of nowhere appeared two Hollywood hotshots, Ryan Reynolds and Rob McElhenney. In 2020, they began the process of buying the club. It wasn't a case of throwing money at the struggling club. Unlike the oil money that's being pumped into the Premier League, this Hollywood money came by consensus. The Hollywood duo brought Wrexham fans on board. Over 96% of the registered fans voted to let Reynolds and McElhenney take over the club. And the rest, as they say, is history. Last season, they won the National League. After 15 years, they secured a promotion to the English 4th tier. And the fans can tell you what that means to them and to the city of Wrexham itself.
Yeah, well, Rob and Ryan, obviously, they're brilliant. They're kings in Wrexham, aren't they? Or the gods in Wrexham at the end of the day. They've done so much for the city.
Just the buzz of the town is amazing. Just to see all these people so happy, it's made such a difference to the town. Just absolutely great.
I think it's really good because obviously it's bringing a lot of money to the city. It's making the city grow. It's also bringing a lot of jobs, which I don't think people realise the impact it actually has.
We get everyone from across the globe, and yeah, welcome aboard. Absolutely, get involved. We love it.
The town is buzzing, the city is growing, and so are job opportunities. Basically, this football fairy tale has had a real-world economic impact. And that's been confirmed by the managing director of the company, North Wales Tourism, a former guardsman called Jim Jones. He said the new high-profile owners and the eyeballs they've brought has resulted in about £1 billion of free advertisements. That's $1.27 billion, or 105 billion rupees. No wonder the Wrexham locals are ecstatic. And it's not just Wrexham that's reaping the benefits, but all of North Wales. Like Wrexham AFC, Wales itself has seen mixed fortunes over the years. North Wales especially suffers from low economic productivity and a high cost of living. The sparsely populated agrarian hinterlands are beautiful but underdeveloped. So a boost of this magnitude brought by the football and the promotional campaigns around it are a big boon to the region. And it's likely that this is just the beginning. Last season, Wrexham won its promotion. Now there's a television series that chronicles its journey. Last season's fairy tale is coming to screens soon. So expect the tourism industry in North Wales to benefit for a while to come.
Pope Francis describes himself as many things: the outsider pope, a normal man, a so-called sinner. But most importantly, he calls himself the Pope from the end of the earth. His appointment was a symbolic one. Very few have made a journey from Argentina to the Vatican. So Pope Francis was the first Latin American to lead the Roman Catholic Church. Perhaps it is this journey that explains his love for peripheries, of communities that have long been ignored. This explains his trip to Mongolia. Pope Francis is currently visiting this nation, his first papal visit to the Central Asian country, and it's creating quite a lot of buzz. Mongolia is a predominantly Buddhist nation. It does have a Catholic community, but it consists of only 1,400 people, 1,400, that's it. This is one of the smallest Catholic communities in the world, but according to the Pope, it is a great one.
Going to Mongolia means going to a small population in a large country. Mongolia seems endless, and it has few inhabitants. A small population but with a great culture. I think it will do us good to understand this silence so long, so deep. It will help us to understand it not intellectually, but to understand it with our senses.
In 1992, Mongolia left behind its Soviet-allied government. It adopted religious freedom. That's when the Catholic Church cemented its presence here. Today, Mongolia remains a non-Christian nation, but the Catholic community has called the visit a gesture of support.
I'm so happy to see the Pope. I'm very thankful for his visit. We have been waiting for this moment for such a long time. He shook my hand twice. I'm so excited.
I feel very holy, and I didn't know this place was a Catholic church right beside where I live. I live just beside this school, and this place got suddenly famous, I guess.
Now, this visit may be all about support for the ignored, but the geopolitical undertone is hard to ignore. Mongolia is neighbored by Russia in the north and China in the south. This will be the closest that Pope Francis has been to either country. So clearly, there is geopolitical agenda at play. The Vatican is basically keeping its door open. It wants to improve relations with both Russia and China. But how well is that going? With Moscow, not so good. Pope Francis has taken a clear stance on the war in Ukraine. He has blamed Moscow for the aggression and even tried to broker a peace deal. But that went nowhere. So relations with Moscow could be dicey. But with China, things are slightly better. Pope Francis reached Ulaanbaatar after flying through Chinese airspace. Which brings us to Vatican protocol. It says that the Pope must send greetings to the leader of whichever country he's flying over. And this gave Pope Francis an opportunity to address Xi Jinping. He sent good wishes to the president and the Chinese people. Beijing has now responded to this. It wishes to, quote-unquote, strengthen mutual trust with the Vatican.
China has noted reports of Pope Francis's blessings, which reflect friendship and goodwill. China and the Vatican have maintained communication in recent years, and China is willing to continue to work with the opposite side to hold constructive dialogue, enhance understanding, build mutual trust, and advance the process of improving relations between the two sides.
Now, China and the Vatican do not have official ties. Beijing's Communist Party is officially atheist. It exercises strict control over all religious institutions in China, but that has not stopped Pope Francis. In 2018, he reached a secretive agreement with Beijing. It allowed both sides to have a say in appointing bishops. This deal was renewed last year. So the Pope may paint this visit as one to understand Mongolia, but it has political dimensions as well, which brings us to the Pope himself. From his first speech, he set the tone for a different papacy. His supporters like his common touch. He enjoys wide popularity both on ground and on social media. He has tackled issues that the church had mostly avoided, like LGBTQ unions or female clergy. His papacy has been one of a kind. He's called the political pope for a reason. He has dived into many international conflicts, including Korea, Syria, Cuba, Palestine. Not all have gone well. He has also called for reconciliation in global conflicts, dispatched emissaries, launched initiatives wherever he can. Case in point, the war in Ukraine. Like I said, he tried to broker peace and failed. It is said that his experience with poverty while growing up shapes his views. Pope Francis believes economic injustice is at the heart of the world's conflicts. And this is the lens that colors his ideas. It's another matter that they seldom deliver change. The Vatican may be powerful, but other than words and gestures, the Pope is changing very little. You could say words matter, and they do, but only so much. Plus, there is a divide in the Pope's support. He may have enormous acclaim outside the church, but within it, he faces opposition. His foes come both from a traditional right, those who are unhappy with his progressive agenda, and an impatient left, those who want more reform, which leaves Pope Francis with just gestures. They may be political, but they're more often than not useless. Today, Parisians woke up to a different city, a city free of rented electric scooters. The French capital was an early adopter of e-scooters in 2018. In fact, it led the way for Europe, but it has since been loathed by many. Citizens view it as a nuisance. Plus, there has been a string of accidents, so now Paris is ditching them. E-scooters will be available in other parts of France, but in the capital, rented e-scooters are a no-no. Our next report tells you why Paris is bidding over to rented electric scooters.
Paris, it's known as the city of love, the city of lights, and also the city of scooter accidents. Last year, Paris registered 459 accidents involving e-scooters. 3 of those were fatal. So now, the French capital is cracking down on rented e-scooters. It's bidding au revoir to them. In 2018, Paris adopted e-scooters. Back then, it was seen as a revolutionary move. It led the way for Europe. But on its streets, there was pure havoc. Users zipped through crowds of pedestrians. They parked awkwardly, sometimes on pavements and at intersections. Plus, they crashed into passers-by. So, Paris brought about an April referendum. Keep the scooters or ditch them? That was the big question. It was billed as a rare public consultation. The referendum led to long queues at ballot boxes around the city. However, the turnout was low. Only 7.46% of registered voters showed up. But they voted overwhelmingly in favor of banning rental e-scooters.
The most dangerous thing to me is that at times, the riders are 2 or 3 people on one scooter, they wear headphones and so on.
I think we should have kept them because they are a means of transport like others. These days, we need to move fast, be fast, and choose a transport that would be as fast as an Uber Eats delivery.
What are the companies saying? They have already started removing their vehicles, 15,000 of them. The plan is to send them off to other cities. Some will remain in service in other parts of France. Others will be sent off to Germany, London and Copenhagen.
In this long period of time, we have tried to persuade the city of Paris that electric scooters are a good option among all the public transports available in order to avoid car congestion in the city and offer sustainable and practical public transports. Sadly, our effort was not successful, and today we are removing the scooters.
For privately owned scooters, the minimum age for riders used to be 12, but the government has raised it to 14. They also must be parked in designated spots, and riders are not allowed to go over 10 kilometers per hour. While Paris is the biggest metropolis to ban e-scooters, these vehicles inspire both love and loathing across the globe. While users hail them as eco-friendly, many consider them an unsightly menace with the power to maim and kill. There have been outright bans in Barcelona and Montreal. In Copenhagen too, they were first banned, then unbanned. Rome too is clamping down on them. So, if your European dream includes jetting off on a scooter, beware of the rules, or your dreams could come crashing down.
And now it's time for Vantage Shots, images that tell the story. There's another crater on the moon, courtesy Russia. The Luna 25 mission has left a 10-meter wide crater on the moon after it crashed while trying to soft land. A so-called wall of shame separating Peru's rich and poor districts is now being torn down. It comes after a 4-year legal battle between the two sides. And police in Nebraska pulled over an unusual traffic violator, a giant bull, riding in the front passenger seat. And finally, we're taking you back in history on this day, 1923. The Great Kanto earthquake struck Japan. It was so powerful that it destroyed the Central Weather Bureau's seismometers. The earthquake killed over 100,000 people. This year, Tokyo is marking the 100th anniversary of the disaster. We're leaving you on that note. Thanks for watching. Have a great weekend. We'll see you tomorrow.
Seven instruments to study the sun's outer layers, such as the photosphere, chromosphere, and outermost regions. These instruments will include detectors for electromagnetic and particle activities, as well as to measure magnetic field. 4 of these payloads will be used to look straight into the sun, while the rest will study particles and fields at the L1 point. So why is studying the sun so